Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the Porco family, and we are off to New York, baby. I want to be a part of it. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! So, we are starting today's case in Albany, New York, in particular, Bethlehem. It's a town in Albany, New York, with the place names. Again, brought me joy. I was like, they are nice place names. And it does not disappoint. It looks very lovely. I'll share some pictures. Looks nice. And it is a nice place to live and to bring up your children. And Joan and Peter Porco, unfortunate surname, I think. Like, isn't it? Bit of a shame. Anyway. This is where Joan and Peter Porco decided to live and raise a family. At the time of our story, they had been married for over 30 years. They had two sons together. The eldest son was called Jonathan and the youngest son was called Christopher. Jonathan was a Navy officer and Chris was a student at Rochester University. Rochester. New York has a nice accent, I think. It's quirky, isn't it? New York. New York. I can't do it. I want to do it. Yo. Why has the New York accent got to start with yo? Yo. New York. Give me... I've got to Google it. Water. Talk. I'm going to talk. Off. What do you want to talk about? Oh my God. He's going to fall. Stop. Joan worked in a school and Peter worked in law. They had met at Albany University and they were both churchgoers as well. So they were part of their community in Bethlehem, and that's funny, isn't it, that it's called Bethlehem? Someone was like, this place in America is going to be called Bethlehem. They must have thought it was very special. Anyhow, life looked very good for them. Nice jobs, nice place to live, children, church-going people, part of the community. Jobs are good un. Until one fateful November morning when all of that would just come crashing down. On the morning of the 15th of November in 2004, Peter Porco would get up as per usual to begin his day. He got out of bed, used the bathroom, walked downstairs, went to the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, made himself a packed lunch, went out to the front to collect the newspaper, got locked out, silly him, found the key under the spare key under the flower pot. That's a thing that people do everywhere, I think, and let himself back in with the paper, and then he dropped dead. You see, this was not a usual morning, not at all. And if anyone had seen Peter pottering about doing his normal morning routine, they would have been horrified because his jaw was hanging off. He was dripping blood everywhere. It was pouring out of him. Half of his skull was gone and his brain was exposed because Peter had been attacked in his bed the night before. He had been hit over his head and face 16 times, with an axe. I honestly cannot, and then he didn't die when his alarm went off in the morning, despite these horrific and eventually fatal wounds. He got up and he freaking got ready for work. What the actual? This is like the opposite of man flu. Got a bit of a cold, suddenly can't get off the sofa to get a glass of water and some paracetamol. No. I've got to lay here shivering under a duvet. This guy, 16 axe wounds to the head, still getting ready for work. Blimey. Honestly, when I was researching this, I could not believe it. I was like, really? And part of me thought, really? Did he actually do? But I will share some pictures. They are a bit grim. Some of them are a bit gruesome. It's bloody more than anything. They followed the blood trail, basically the blood evidence showed them what he had done when he'd got out of bed. So when you sort of follow through the pictures, you can see that he got up and he went into the bathroom, and you can see that he then walked downstairs, and there was lots of places where he had sort of touched the walls and things like that. And the blood evidence showed that he'd gone into the kitchen. He'd definitely been standing over the dishwasher for a time. So loading or unloading, I think loading it, I read. And then there was his lunchbox. And then he came in and then he collapsed on the floor in the hall. And that is where he passed away. His wife, Joan, was upstairs. She was still in bed. And she too had suffered horrific injuries. She had been struck 3 times with the axe on her head and face. So it was such a gruesome attack. When Peter didn't arrive at work that day, eventually, as the day went on, the police were called because it was very unlike him. So officers went to the house, and like I say, he'd walked in through the front door and he was literally laying in the hallway. So he was the first body that they found. And then they went upstairs and they found Joan in bed. And if they weren't already traumatised, they would be, because she frickin' moved. She moved. So Joan, much like her husband, had not died straight away when she had been attacked. And she was laying in the bed, alive. Joan couldn't actually speak because she had horrific injuries to her head and her face, but she was moving her hand to signal that she was still alive. And it didn't look likely that she was going to make it. So she was then taken quickly into hospital. And so the investigation began. They quickly realised that there was no forced entry into the property. There'd been someone had used a knife to slash a screen door. It looked like an attempt to make it look like somebody had broken in, but they hadn't. Also, there was nothing stolen, and there were things out and about in the house like purse, wallet, money, that was all still there. So it was clear that this was not the motive for the attack. Miles away in Rochester, so this is their youngest son, Chris. He's at uni there. And this blew my mind. So he's just going about his day, and then he gets a phone call from a local newspaper in Rochester asking him, how do you feel? And stuff like this about the death of your parents. I say, what? So Chris then rings the police back in Albany. Can you imagine, that is terrible, isn't it? Finding out from a reporter, not family, not the police, a freaking reporter. How does that happen? That's awful. That's bad. That is terrible. I hope that doesn't happen often. Both sons, Jonathan and Chris, they travel up home to Albany. By the way, just to jump in here, I have got to share it with you because it blew my mind. When I was researching this, it said that Christopher made the 200 and something, 40 miles something journey home. And I was thinking, hang on, Rochester University is in New York and Albany is in New York. I didn't know that, obviously. So I gave myself a geography lesson in this process, in this case. I was like, right. So I get up the map and I'm like, right, yeah, they're there like that. I'll show you. They're like this. 240 miles. I was thinking, what? It's a long old trek and it's in the same state. And I know, I'm making myself sound really stupid, but I knew that obviously America is huge and it's much bigger than England. But I've never, ever actually put that into context and thought about how big it actually really is and how big the UK is. I've just thought, oh yeah, it's much bigger. But to think, because then I looked at the map of the UK, right? I'll share that too. I just found this interesting, sorry if it's boring. But from the bottom to midway up, half of our entire country is 240 something miles, I think. And just 2 parts of New York are 240. Blew my tiny mind. Blew my mind. I was like, what? So here you would be halfway up the country, our entire little country. But geez, like, we are tiny, aren't we? We are a tiny, teeny country. Cute, though. I find that cute, but flippin' heck, that did blow my mind. Anyway, I digress. So both sons, Jonathan and Christopher, they come to Albany. They see their mother in the hospital, and then she is swiftly taken into surgery to save her life. But all was not as it seemed with this, dutiful son situation. Well, one half, legit. The other half, not so much. Youngest son, Christopher, he is whisked into interview as soon as his mum is taken in for surgery, because it turns out that while she was conscious, the police had been able to ask Joan some questions, and it had been clear that there hadn't been a break-in. So the police asked her if she knew who had attacked her, and she nodded. Yeah. Oh my God. And then, I don't know how they did this. Did they show her pictures, or did they know her and know the kids' names? I'm not sure. Anyway, whatever. But I think these things, I'm like, maybe I'd be a good detective. Maybe not. But, so they said, is it Jonathan, the eldest son? And she goes, no. And then they say, was it Christopher? And she nods, yeah. All this nodding and shaking the head, by the way, when her jaw is like hanging off and she's got half her brain exposed as well. Jesus, why not blinks? All this nodding, like poor woman. Christopher said, no, it was not me. She was mistaken. And he was at university the night of the attack, and that he'd fallen asleep on the sofa in a dormitory room. I think he was part of a frat house. Educate me, because I don't really know all the ins and outs of like fraternities and stuff like that. To be honest, it just sounds terrifying. And so he was asleep in the dorm, on the sofa in the dorm room or something. However, this was not corroborated by his frat brothers. They had been in the dorm room that night and they were like, no, he wasn't there. So they didn't have his back on that one. Rightly so. I'm not saying that's wrong, but they just said what they knew. However, witnesses had seen him later in the morning jogging around campus. Despite his insistence that he had been in the frat house on the sofa, he stuck with that. CCTV footage at the university saw his very distinctive yellow Jeep leaving the campus at about 10:30 that night. He claimed that, I did move my Jeep. I moved it off campus. Why? And then I walked back, and then I went to bed on the sofa in the dorm room. Shut up. As the investigation unfolded, the police pieced together what they thought had happened, and along the way there were witnesses that could identify the yellow Jeep being in these certain places throughout the night. So, based on how long it would have taken to drive from Rochester to Albany, because it's so freaking far away, half the UK, he would have arrived between sort of like 2 and 2:30 in the morning at his parents' house in Albany. And a neighbour saw his yellow Jeep outside of the Porco's house at 4 a.m. So this neighbour got up and went to work at this ungodly hour. Thank God people do it. And he saw the yellow Jeep. The police then spoke to the burglar alarm. That's tricky. The police spoke to the security system. Yeah, that'll do. And said, can you tell us, the activity for that night on the burglar alarm? And they said, oh yeah, guess what? 2:15 a.m. So in that window, 2:15, somebody used the code and disarmed the alarm. But guess what? Whoever had done that had then afterwards smashed up the burglar alarm, right? So they tried to make it look like somebody had broken in badly because they hadn't bashed the door in or anything. But yeah, so they smashed the burglar alarm, but the security system could see that somebody had actually input the number. And it is just chilling to think, because piecing together what then happened, Chris went home, likely went into the garage to get the axe. It was their axe that was used to kill them, and it was kept in the garage. So he went home, got the axe, turned off the alarm, and then crept through his house up to his mum and dad's bedroom and murdered them in their sleep. So he thought he was murdering them. That is absolutely chilling, isn't it? That is something out of horror films. That is scary as something. They did make a film out of this, by the way. Let me know if you've seen it. I have not. 3 hours later, or 3 hours after the alarm had been turned off, the phone line to the house was cut. The police then believe that Christopher drove back to Rochester and then went for a jog to make sure that he was seen. Who has the energy? Often in these cases, I'm like, where does that come from? Is it pure adrenaline? It must be. But even like a 4-hour drive and then an axe attack, clear up, and then a 4-hour drive home, and then a jog. Do me a favour. There was not any physical evidence, and this is like, annoying. No physical evidence that Chris killed his parents. There wasn't any fingerprints left behind, nothing on the axe, nothing. Not a hair, not a fibre. The evidence that they did have was that his Jeep left Rochester campus at around 10:30. They had a witness that saw his Jeep outside his parents' house at 4 a.m. And they also had witness reports from, he would have gone through on his journey, like toll booth things. 2 toll booth employees said, I think one said that they saw the Jeep and they ID'd the Jeep and they said, oh yeah, that came through. So he was on, that's on his way to Albany. And then another toll booth, I think they identified, hello, excuse me, I think they identified him as being the person that they saw in the Jeep. So they have some more witnesses there. But this only proves that he's been on a journey. And then, I bet the prosecution loved this, when Joan was awake and healing from her surgery, she was very disfigured, her face, like awful. She changed, I can't say changed her mind, really, but she said that Chris was innocent and that if she'd have been asked after rightly so, to be fair to the woman, they were asking her, was it who hit you? Yes, no, like shaking her head, nodding her head. Who was it? Did I say who killed you? I meant who hit you. Did I say that? Oh my God, I'm sorry. What? I need another coffee, don't I, in my life? But what her point was that she had just been beaten around the head with an axe, like 3 times in the night, laying there. Like, she has no memory of it. She said after the event, she can't remember a thing. So she can't remember who attacked her. She can't remember. So even though the police were saying, but you did identify your son, you said it was Chris, she's like, yeah, maybe I did. Can't remember saying it though. And maybe I did. And maybe I didn't even know what you were saying. She was in a state, wasn't she? So I'm with her on that one. You cannot trust her identification at a time where she's just been an attempted murder, like bashed over the head with an axe and her face hanging off. No. What is sad is that rather than just think, look, I don't remember and I have to tell the truth, I don't remember who attacked me, she didn't just say that. She said, there's no way it would have been Chris. So she was and is to this day adamant that her son did not attack her, when in truth, look at the facts, she can't remember. So she doesn't know. And actually, and this is very sad for her, and it would be as a parent to even think it, but the evidence suggests that it very much likely was her son. The attacker would have been covered in blood. That's a yeah, that's gruesome. Like 16 blows. And with cases like this, this reminds me of the White House Farm murders. I want to say like, oh, that's one of my favourites, but it's like, how is that like awful of me to have a favourite? No, it's not, is it, to have a favourite case, I suppose. But I always think like, oh, to be a fly on the wall, because in a way, yeah, like I think everyone would just, especially family members, like you just would want to know. You'd want to know what happened and who did it. If there's any question over who did it, you would just want to know, wouldn't you? The attacker would have been covered in blood, would have been a messy situation. 16 blows with an axe to one person, 3 to the other, causing substantial injuries and a lot of blood. However, Chris's Jeep was clean. When they got to the Jeep, which wouldn't have been long after what happened, there was no traces of blood or anything like that in his Jeep. No fingerprints had been left. However, he could have worn gloves from the minute he got out of his Jeep. He could have worn coveralls, and he could have murdered his parents, put everything into a bag, carefully showered and changed into new clothes. So, yeah. And then this piqued my interest. There was a possible mob link. Say what? Yeah, mob link. Because Peter worked in law, and there was a guy, I think this must happen quite a lot, it's not the job for me, just upsetting people left, right and centre, but an aggrieved customer? What's the word? Oh, I've written down litigant. I don't even know what that means. I must have read it in research and I've just copied it, but an aggrieved, unhappy litigant, check me out, that was involved in a custody case, and he obviously was unhappy with Peter's decision or evidence or whatever that was given, and he vowed revenge on Peter. Bum, bum, bum. However, there was a solid alibi for that man. So that was sort of like put to the side. Could have got someone else to do it though, couldn't he? Anyway, there were other sort of like ifs and buts. Joan had seen somebody a couple of weeks before in their back garden, a stranger, and that had freaked her out, and she told a friend about it. So there were these things that were sort of on the outskirts that could have possibly, could somebody else have done this? However, we come back to the alarm and the code. Jonathan said that there was only a handful of people that knew that code, Christopher being one of them. So whoever was there that night, they knew the code. Chris and his parents did not have a very great relationship. Chris was really angry at the time with his parents. Chris definitely had issues. He was a compulsive liar. He would tell lots of tales. He would tell people that his family were very rich and wealthy, that they had like multiple holiday homes, that they had buckets of money, when it wasn't true, and other things. He would lie about a lot. Porco told porkies. Throughout the case, Christopher's sort of personality was called into question, and it was concluded that he was a sociopath. Interestingly, even Peter, his own father, had thought this and mentioned this to a colleague. So he knew that his son was troubled. Christopher was also a thief, predominantly, I believe, stealing from his parents. He forged a number of loans, so he would apply for a loan and then forge his father's signature. So basically, I think he ended up in $50,000 worth of debt. Chris would lie so much, and he wasn't doing well in school. There were a number of occasions in college where he would lie to his parents about what was actually going on, and eventually he dropped out of college. He lied when he did leave. So for a while he just continued to say that he was at college, but he wasn't. To re-enroll, when he decided, I think he was all over the place, it seemed. Very difficult person to sort of grasp and be around, I imagine. And when he decided I want to go, I'll give it another try, he needed to secure a 30 grand loan to reapply and go back into college. And again, he forged his dad as a signatory on this loan. Just awful. Little shit, basically. While all of this is going on 2 occasions, he has broken into their house, his parents' house, and taken their laptops. He did this on 2 occasions, took their laptops and then sold them on eBay. Joan said that just before his death, Peter was getting very close to having a nervous breakdown. He was finding Christopher's behaviour very, just increasingly difficult to handle. Not long before the attack on his parents, Christopher went to seek financial advice, and he told that financial advisor that he was shortly going to be coming into a large amount of money. And so the police and the investigation, they determined that the motive behind murdering his parents, fueled by anger and, because they were getting so cross with him, and it seemed like it was reaching a peak, but the reason was inheritance. Just a joke. He would have got $1 million. His trial began in June 2006. Again, no physical evidence, and his mum took the stand to testify for him and say it wasn't him. It wasn't him. Although that's just, she can't remember. In her own admission, she can't remember anything about that night, so she can't be sure it wasn't him. But I find that heartbreaking. I really do. However, he was found guilty of his father's murder and the attack on his mum. One of the clinchers for the jury, and I find this really interesting, he worked at a veterinary, why do I want to say service? And shop. That's not it. Veterinary practice. Safe. And his boss said that he was trained to clear up after animal surgeries, and that involved clearing up a lot of blood, stuff like that. Under the sink at his parents' home, they found a box of latex gloves and bin bags. Yeah, sure, people have those sort of things in their homes, but I think it just got into the jury's head that this guy could have just worn gloves. He could have, what's crazy is that there is a bag somewhere. Say if he did wear a coverall and gloves and stuff like that, if he did, he probably did. He could have worn, someone did say he could have worn scrubs from work, literally just put them over his clothes, and then he would have been protected. He could have just taken those things off and then got rid of them. But it's crazy because somewhere, maybe it doesn't exist anymore, but somewhere there was a bag with evidence and just never got found. Why couldn't he have just left a fingerprint and on the axe? How nice would that be? Job done. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years. He appealed quite quickly and that was denied. No, thank you. His mother and a lot of his friends and family, I think nearly all, truly believe that he is innocent and that he's been wrongfully convicted. And I can, in a way, see that when you love someone, you care for someone, especially your own kid, you're not going to want to believe that they've done that. The only thing that my mind just keeps coming back to is that his Jeep was witnessed outside the house. Somebody that knew the code entered the code. Come on. He left the campus. It's okay, if you didn't, what were you doing? And why was your Jeep outside there at 4 a.m? It just doesn't make sense. It was him, wasn't it? Come on. I've opened myself up now to all these people that are actually, this and this. Throw it at me, because I love that. I love that when it's and then I get to think about it and not sleep ever again, because I'll be like, oh my God, was it him? I'm going to end this case with I think it was the final email that his dad sent to Chris. His email concluded, "We may be disappointed with you, but your mother and I still love you and care about your future." And that just gets me, because he killed his dad and he tried to kill his mum. And it's just, and they did and do, she does, love him very much. So they were just trying their best and trying in this like crazy situation. And ultimately, I mean, he's not well, is he? But yeah, I find it really sad and really chilling when that happens. And it's so unnatural, isn't it? You know, when parents kill children and children kill parents, it feels the most unnatural thing to happen. Yeah, it's no right. My brain, I must admit, did kind of get a bit stuck on the mafia thing, the mob, because, you know, he did work in law. He probably did make a lot of people angry. But the only way that I can even entertain it and work it in my head is that someone from the mob went to the son's university, or they were blackmailing him in some way, and that never came out. Like, you know, they would have gone through his computer and phone and everything. But they, you know, that they went there, got him, made him put the code in, and then murdered or tried to murder his mum and dad. Unlikely, eh? But yeah, anyway, strange things, you never know. And that is all I have for you on today's story. Missed you loads. It's good to be back. I did enjoy having a little break. I'm not going to lie, it was nice. I didn't have an agenda because I didn't do uni work either, or work. So I didn't work, I didn't do uni work, and I didn't film, and I didn't research. Yeah, lots of wallowing in the bath, watching Bondi Rescue, eh? And ate loads of cheese, drank lots of wine, chocolate. Yeah, I enjoyed myself. We just hibernated, really. It's nice, isn't it, to do that sometimes? And New Year's Eve and New Year's Day was not that bad. I ignored it. I don't like it. It makes me like miserable. I don't know why. Just don't like it. Sometimes you just don't like things, do you? And yeah, I get a bit emotional, a bit miserable. I don't know. So I was like, oh God, I had a bit of dread, like towards when it was getting near that. But you know, it was fine. It was actually all right. I think because I just tried to take care of myself a bit more. Yeah. So, but now I'm feeling well rested, productive, motivated, and excited. All these words, good words. It's like I'm having my sort of, you know, those feelings that when people like New Year, it's because they're like, oh, I love it. It's like a fresh start. It's a new this. You think of all the possibility. And I'm just like, no, I'm having that now, though. Now I'm just like, right, what's next? Bring it. I want to crack on. I'm going to love you and leave you. Please, could I have some case suggestions below? I've got a list and I do look at them, but I want to bulk my list. I want to have a nice big chunky list of case suggestions. So get typing. Yeah, that'll, yes, see, motivated. Boom. 2023. Okay, I'm going to go. Okay, I love you. I'm going to see you next week. Bye.